Hello there and welcome. In this episode, we're going to hopefully finish working on the fishing system. In the previous episode, we added our minigame and we have most of the code working. We still need to deal with a few things, so let's get into it. First of all, we're going to open our fishing system, and inside we're going to add a reference to the fish that is biting, because when we're going to succeed in the minigame, we want to add this fish into the inventory of the player, and in order to know which fish to add, we need to have a reference to it. So we can simply say fish data, fish biting, and then we're simply going to set this fish over here before we start the minigame. And the way we can do this is by simply taking this fish that we pass here as this argument, right? Because this is the fish that we got over here. This is the fish that we got from our water source and from the list and from the calculation. And then we simply passed it inside this method so we can use it finally, right? Now that we have this reference for the fish is biting, we can add it to the inventory of the player. We also need to set it to be null when the fishing is ended. So over here, we can also say fishing that is biting is null, because if we ended the fishing, we should clear this reference. So we have this method over here from the previous episode and minigame. So over here, we want to add this fish into the inventory. So inventory system instance add to inventory, and we need to provide the name of the fish, so we can simply say biting fish, fish biting, fish name, because each fish data has its own name. In this way, we can instantiate it from our resources folder and add it into the inventory. Now, if you're following this tutorial for the fishing and you did not follow this entire series and you don't have the inventory, you simply need to add the fish into your own inventory, right? So if you have another inventory system, we are simply adding it into the inventory, into our inventory. But if you have another inventory system, you simply need to add your fish, so you can add it by its name. Or another way to add it is by the actual inventory item inside of this fish data. The way our inventory system is working is that it needs a name, and then it simply goes into the resources folder over here and it looks for this inventory item, right? So it will look for fish, for salmon, and then it will instantiate it and add it to the inventory. So we don't even need to provide it with the inventory item. But if you want to do something with the inventory item, maybe you want to display the icon or the sprite of the fish, maybe you want to add more data, we're going to have this. So we're actually going to copy one of our existing inventory items. Let's say stone. No, something that we can eat. Maybe, yes, we have the cooked meat. So again, this is an inventory item. We can know this by looking at this script. And it also has this drag and drop, but we are simply going to duplicate this one and we're going to rename it to be, let's say, salmon. Now we can change all the different data. So salmon, a fatty and delicious fish can be found in rivers. Something like that. We can also say can be eaten. We can set the different health and calories that we will gain by eating it. It should be it should be consumable, so we keep it as is consumable. Again, we already did a lot of these. We created many different inventory items, so you simply need to set all the data over here. Salmon. And now we can simply go into our scriptable objects, fish data, and add this over here into this inventory item slot. And now we also have a reference to the actual inventory item. Now again, this is not required for our inventory system because our inventory system simply looks for the name of the fish and then it gets this inventory item by itself. But it's a good thing to keep a reference to the inventory item over here because we already have this scriptable object, so why not? Then you can always access this and you can get maybe the sprite, you can get different information. So it's a good practice, okay? So we are going to equip our fishing rod. We're going to cast it into the water and wait for the bite. And now we can see in the console that it says that salmon is biting. So we're going to right click and it's going to start the minigame. And as I told you, you can disable the movement of the player, but I think it looks nice that the player is struggling with the fish also physically. And then we're going to catch the fish and win this minigame, and it should add the fish into our inventory. And as we can see, the salmon was added into the inventory. Now we didn't change the sprite, so we have the sprite of this steak over here, but we can see that it is the salmon. So everything is working. Another functionality we want to add, and it's something that I talked about, is adding difficulty to different fish. So for example, some rare fish will be harder to catch, and not just because of the rarity. So even if we did manage to catch them, right, we did manage to get them to bite, so the probability was very low, but we still got it. We want to make the minigame also a bit harder, right? We want to increase the challenge for these fish. So if it's some kind of very basic sardine or something like that, the minigame can be very simple, very easy. But if the fish is very rare or expensive, then you can add speed or basically increase the difficulty of the minigame. And to do this, we're going to open our fishing system. Inside, we're going to add a reference to the fish movement. So public fish movement. And now we're going to take this, and when we start the minigame, we're simply going to create a method inside to set the difficulty. So set difficulty. Now we still don't have this method, but we're going to create it. And inside we need to also pass the fish so we know what is the difficulty. We're going to set the difficulty based on the fish. So biting fish. Fish biting. This is the reference that we created earlier. Now we're going to generate this method and it's going to generate it inside the fish movement. Let's also rename this with a lowercase f because it's a variable. So we're going to open our fish movement and inside we can see this set difficulty method. And before we start with the logic, we want to go to our fish data and add another field over here, which will be a public int fish difficulty. So this will be the difficulty of this fish. So each fish will have a different difficulty and it will be an integer and there will be 3 different levels. There will be level 1, level 2 and level 3. So level 3 will be the hardest one and level 1 will be the easiest one. Okay, and this way you can assign a difficulty to each kind of fish. So now that we have this, we can go back into our fish movement and we can add the code over here. So we're simply going to have some switch statement that is going to check the fish and it's going to assign or basically change the move speed based on this fishing. So we're going to take the fish and we're going to access the difficulty. So it's going to check the difficulty of the fish and it's going to set and change the move speed. So for example, case 1. So if the level is 1, we're going to set the move speed to be 250. This is the basic speed that we know, right? Then we're going to copy this 2 more times. Level 2, level 3, and let's also set 0, and this will basically be some kind of warning that we forgot to assign a level to our fish. So over here we can increase it to 350. I think that 200, I think we are going to lower it to 200. Then we're going to set 300 and 350. I think more than that it will be too fast, because remember that the fishing catcher movement is 250. So at some point it will be just impossible to catch the fish, right? Then we also of course need to return, because we don't want to continue with this case. So let's add returns over here. And let's also add a debug log warning, or actually even error, log error, difficulty not found for this fish. Right, so this is level 1, level 2, and level 3. Now still keep in mind that you also have the probability of the fish. So you can both use the probability to make it harder to find a certain kind of fish, but you can also increase the difficulty for the minigame. Now that we said this, we can go back to our fish data. So let's go to our scriptable objects, and we're going to set the salmon to be difficulty level 2. Let's say tuna will be, let's say 3, okay? Now the probability is very low, and we also did not create the inventory item. So let's just create the inventory item for the tuna. Let's duplicate the salmon. Let's rename this to tuna. Let's also change the sprite. So I have all of these fish from the asset that I showed you earlier. Let's say this is a tuna. And let's also change the icon for the salmon. So let's icon say this is a salmon. And now it's done. Now we can test this out and see if there's actually a change in the difficulty. So again, we equip the rod, and we're probably going to get a salmon because it has the highest probability. And now we're going to, and you can see that it's actually a bit faster than before. So I'm really struggling to catch it. Now it was still doable, so this is level 2. You can increase the speed, you can increase the rarity, it's really up to you. Now we have the salmon over here, and we know that it's working. And if we got a tuna, then it would be even harder because we set the level to be 3. Now, there is one final thing that I want to add to the fishing system. Although there's a lot of things you can add, it's really up to you. There's sounds and there's animations and effects. You can do whatever you want. For now, we have the console to know that there is a bite, but the player has no visual indication that there is a bite. So when he casted the rod, he will just wait there endlessly and he won't even know that there is a fish biting. So we want to add some kind of indicator. And for this, we're going to have some kind of little exclamation mark that is going to appear, and it will let the player know that he needs to pull the rod. Okay, of course, you can add more explanations. You can add some kind of UI that will explain the mechanics. Click on this to pull the rod, click on this to cast the rod. It's very important to let the player know how to play the game, right? So for this, we're going to download an asset that I'm going to provide you in the description. It's going to be this alert over here. Of course, when you import it, make sure to set it as a sprite and that alpha is transparency and apply. So it will be transparent all around, okay? Now, if you're not using this fishing rod asset that I showed you, the one that we are using with the rope and the bait, you can just create your own bait and then add it into the slot of your fishing rod, right? Because in the fishing system, we are simply instantiating this bait on the water. And this fishing rod script goes on any kind of fishing rod model. It doesn't have to be this one. And over here we have a reference to the bait prefab. So you can simply create some kind of primitive circle, give it a color, find another asset for bait, and then drag it inside, and it will instantiate it as the bait. So we are going to still use this one that comes with the pack, and we're going to double click on it. It's going to open the prefab, and then we're going to click and add an image. So it's going to create a canvas inside of the bait. And we're going to set the canvas to be world space because it's not going to be an actual UI. It's going to be inside of the scene, right? It's going to be in world space. So now we want to add this sprite over here. So we're going to find the exclamation mark. You can also use these ones. I don't remember where I got them. So let's see this one, alert. And we still cannot see it, probably because the size is a bit too large. So we are going to decrease the size of the canvas itself. We're going to set it, instead of being full HD, to 10 and 10. And it's going to decrease the size. We're also going to change the scale to be 1 and 1. And we also want to make sure that the position is at 0. And now we can see it, but it's still too big. So we're going to click on our image and we're going to decrease it as well. And we're going to set it to 10 and 10. Now we can see that the size is nice. We're going to move it a bit on the y-axis like this. And we also want to rename the canvas itself to be alert. Now it's going to save this as the prefab, so we don't need to apply anything because we do it inside of the prefab. And now we are going to open our fishing rod script. So we can go to the fishing rod. We're going to open this script. And at the end of the update method, we're going to add some code. If fishing system instance, is there a byte? So if there is a byte, we want to show this exclamation mark. We're simply going to get our bait reference, right? Because we have a reference to the bait. Right, so we go to the actual bait prefab, we look for a child named alert, which is the canvas, and we set it to be true. And if you want to see it visually, we basically go to our bait prefab, and then we look for a child named alert, which is this one, and then we're simply setting it to be visible. So in the beginning, I forgot to tell you, make sure it's invisible, okay? And only when we activate it inside the script, it's going to be visible. So make it invisible. Another thing that we want to do is add some kind of script on our canvas that will basically rotate it towards the camera. Because at the moment, if we run this game and we see this image, it's basically a 2D image inside a world space. And it's not going to look good, and I'm going to show you what I mean. If we run the game and we cast the fishing rod, and we get this UI, then because it's in world space, it's always going to stay in the same spot, and we can go to the side. So it doesn't look good. This is not the way it should be. It should always rotate towards the player, towards the camera. And we can easily do this using a very simple script that I'm going to provide you in the description of this video. All you need to do is add it on the canvas of this alert, of this image. Okay, so you're simply going to create a new script, name it face camera. I already have it over here. And you're going to paste the code inside of this script. So the entire thing with the Unity engine and all. And it's a very simple script that takes the transform and rotates it towards the camera, okay? And we also need to provide the facing camera. So we're going to add this on the canvas over here. Face camera. Now over here inside of the script, we need to provide a reference to the facing camera. But because it's on a bait that is going to be instantiated every time, it will lose the reference to the camera. I still left it this way because you can use this for other things, and it's always a good idea to not hard code the camera that you want to provide, so you can always provide it in the inspector. But in our case, you are simply going to make it private, okay? Or you can actually even delete this entire thing, but you can keep it just for a later use. And then you're going to say camera main. And it will basically take our main camera and it will use it the same way. So again, if you have multiple cameras and you want the UI to face that camera, you need to provide it over here, or maybe find it somewhere inside the start method. But because our main camera is the player view, this is the only camera that we have, we can simply say camera main and it will use the main camera and face the UI to the camera. So we can comment this out. And now when we run the game and we cast it into the water, we can see that the UI will always face us. So it doesn't matter if we try to move around it, it will always face the camera. And this is because we have this face camera script on this UI. And of course, you can use it for other things as well. Now, the last thing we want to do with this bait, with this alert, is to make it a bit more alerting, right? So we're going to add some basic animation. Now again, we can spend hours and hours on making the game look better. So I'm just going to show you a simple way to add animation to this exclamation mark. For this, we're going to drag our bait into the scene and we're going to create an animation on the bait itself. We're not going to do an animation on the UI because we want it to be relative to the bait. So we're going to select the bait, go to the animation tab and create a new animation. Then inside our animation folder, we're going to say bait alert animation. And all we want to do is change the scale of this alert a bit. So first we are going to add a property because we're not going to animate the entire bait. We're only going to animate a child of this bait, this alert. So we're going to add property, alert. We're going to access the image, select the rect transform, and over here we're going to select the scale and we're going to add it. So we only want to animate the scale of the image. And then we're simply going to, we can also make it visible so we can see. Let's just go to the image over here. So we're simply going to increase it in size a bit and we're going to give it some kind of simple animation. So we're going to set keyframes on 10, 20, 40, 60, and 80 frames and make the first one over here. Let's start recording. And then we're simply going to select the first one and we're going to change the scale to 0.9, 0.9, 0.9. We're going to do the same thing for the other ones, but this one we're going to keep at 1. This one we're going to change to 0.9 and make sure that it's selected. Sometimes it keeps getting deselected. Of course, you can also copy these ones and simply paste them over here and then also paste them over here. Okay, so just make sure that this is 0.9, this is 1, this is 0.9, this is 1, and this is 0.9. And then it will basically give you this kind of animation. And now we can play it. And this is a very simple and nice animation. Now again, 0.9 on the scale, 1, 0.9, 1, 0.9. And we made it 80 frames just so it would be a bit smoother. Now we're going to disable the alert. And now it will work as it is. We don't need to go into the animator. We don't need to go to the script because as soon as this alert is enabled, and we already did this inside the script, right? If we go into our script, inside the fishing rod, we set the alert to be active when there is a byte. So the alert will become active. And as we know, when an object becomes active, its animations start running by themselves. So this animation will start running when this becomes active. And now we can save this entire prefab, we can delete it, we can start the game, and it should work. And now we can cast the rod into the water. And we can see this animation, and looks nice. Of course, you can make it a bit bigger, but we can see that it's very simple to do something that looks nice. Now, of course, as I told you, there's still a lot of things you can add, a lot of different design decisions, and it's really up to you how your game is going to look. So that's all for this episode. That's all for the fishing system. If you have any special requests, you can ask me in the comment section, and maybe in a later episode I'm going to add them into the fishing system. But I think that we covered the main things. In the next episode, we're going to continue with our game, with other things that we still need to do. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you're still not a subscriber. Please leave a like. It will help me a lot. And I'll see you next time.